Now live. All right. I'm taking some time off from doing this. So I'll probably be rough and maybe nobody will even show up. It's hard to keep your public speaking chops, so to speak. I'm having allergies today. Flipping kicks. What's up, my man? I was just about to start running my mouth. How's the pond? I'm almost going to start talking about that. Kind of, your pond's a good example of that. Alex has 2.5 acre pond in Georgia. He's been managing for a couple of years now. He's been following the page and trying to apply things. And it was stocked properly, but somebody somewhere over time threw some crappie in there. So he has a competing fish population. So I made a post earlier on social media about how harvesting bass actually works and how it works in the food chain. That's how I titled this. So let's start with addressing that. Alex is sending in a message here. He says his bass are improving. The bluegill blew up and doubled their weight in one growing season. That's good. He added a feeder to try to help combat the crappie population. Small ponds, even small lakes, even up to 100 acres, crappie can negatively impact bass populations. And it's pretty easy to see once you know what to look for. But all right, let me start at the beginning and then we'll work our way there because we're kind of skipping ahead doing it this way. But what's up, Bassmaster? Welcome in, man. Now let's just address his question he's throwing up here. He's been meaning to ask. Lives on a lake and wondering if I catch fish from elsewhere, will they stay around there? Fish are kind of funny, man. It depends on how big the lake is as well. I saw some. If you have like a feeder and stuff like that, you'll have a lot of fish that hang around your property. Is what I mean by they're kind of funny. But even just like in public lakes, I've seen some studies that where they remove bass from an area and in a tournament, and weigh them, measure them, put them back in a different part of the lake. About half the bass make it back to where they were caught, no matter really how far away you move them, but half of them don't. Oh, well, on a place like Chickamauga, where you have like a good structure on probably steep, so you probably have a good depth change and you have good structure that holds fish. You got a hole that holds fish, right? On something like that, I would think about it more like bass are gonna have like an area that they hunt over, kind of like a territory, I guess, is a way to think about it. Although sometimes they'll kind of team up and hunt those territories together, but they tend to get in like a rotational kind of thing. So, um, where they'll be there like certain times of day or certain times of the year, or, la la, whatever. We go down that rabbit hole. But point being is I would kind of treat that as if I was fishing out there, I would fish it a couple times a day probably. I would expect that the fish would rotate up to feed, into areas like that, periodically throughout the day. You might have some hanging around, but I would think they would kind of set up like a rotational deal where they hunt over different areas. It's kind of how I would approach it. Think about it like new fish moving into the area all the time. Because that's kind of how they do. Even in ponds, that's kind of how they do. Like you'll definitely have places in ponds that will always hold bigger fish. Like the bigger fish would kind of have their little areas, but you kind of see what I just described. Like if they're not over there, they're probably over there. And I'm talking about looking at it through an electrofishing boat point of view, not necessarily hook and line point of view. So you can find them a little bit easier. Anyway, what was the post? I was going to address the post that I made, and I've already forgot what the post was about. What that even meant. It's probably not good. It's giving me alerts. Oh, right. What happens when you keep a bass? So we can address that post. And then I just used a basic math example of our Sugar Hill Outdoors growth rates, how much I knew the bass are consuming based on their growth rates, and what happens if you keep a few. Well, your forage base is limited, right? So a pie is a good visual description of it as well. If it's just how many we got in the chat now, we got 6 people in here. So if it's me and 6 other people and we've got a pie, all right, everybody gets a hunk of pie. All right, if we did the same thing, but there were 600 people in the chat, the pie is still only one pie. The forage is only the forage. Like you only have so much of it, just like you only have so much pie. So the more individuals you add, the smaller amount in this case, the smaller amount of forage, or in this case, the smallest amount of pie each individual would get as we increase the people. Same thing works with the forage. As you increase the predators, each individual predator gets less forage, so each individual predator grows slower to the point where they're not growing at all in many cases. So by harvesting, like if you catch some skinny bass, some bass that don't look good, a lot of people try to throw those fish back. Oh, maybe they'll come back. Maybe no. Maybe grow or die. In the pond game, in the small lake management game, get them out of the way. You're out of there. You're fish tacos. Okay, it's nothing personal. Maybe you got gut hooked. Maybe you got maybe a heron. Got you and wounded you internally or whatever. I don't know. It's a hard world. But we can't save them all. And in pond management, like I said, you keep the healthiest fish growing the fastest. It's a real good idea to remove the fish that aren't growing very fast, if at all. And that's how I'm able to channel large amounts of forage to the best bass that I have in the population, because I constantly thin the population down. I don't allow skinny fish to survive. Now, then that becomes into what is a skinny fish, right? Like, how do you define that? You can't, like a lot of guys, are going to play this game of I can hold it up and look at it because my ego is so big, it won't get out of the way of my ear holes and won't listen and actually just weigh the dead gum fish. We have to play that game. So let's try to move away from that. But I just take a measurement of the weight and the length accurately every time and record it. And once you get accustomed to doing that, calculating relative weight is easy. And that's where I get my measurements at. So in the pond, since we stocked it and have been measuring, we've only had a couple, maybe like 2 fish that were under 100% relative weight. But just this season, some of the reproduction fish, in the 1 pound size class at this point, because they were born back in the spring, are most of those fish are down around that 100, 104, 105, kind of low 100 area in relative weight. Or the bigger fish are not. The bigger fish are up in different, because they grew up kind of in a different environment with more forage fish. They're up, and there's fewer of them as well. They're up on top of the food chain at like 120, 125, 130%. Some even higher than that, a few. But there's a significant difference between the first generation fish that we stocked and the generations that have come after. And it's because there's a difference on what's going on how they grew up. The first generation fish went in, there was only 40 fish per acre. The subsequent generations that came behind those fish thousands of bass were born and they kind of ate their way to the top, and that changes the dynamic, so to speak, because the first year growth, those 40 fish per acre went in, or 100 bass or so went in. Um, there weren't thousands of fingerling bass in there feeding over all the reproduction. There was literally just 100 bass in there. So they experienced growth like no other way bass can experience growth in a new pond or a new lake. That first generation of fish is very unique, very special. You can grow very big fish in that first stocking if done right. So that's what we're tracking right now. We're tracking that first stocking and comparing it now to the subsequent years. And this will be the year that it gets good. I'll probably set up like a game camera or something out there near the feeder so we can get or maybe I'll just have Clint move the game camera around or something like that so I can get like Wi-Fi type feed down here, videos like that. Stay on top of it a little bit more this year because now we're moving into the time when we're going to be really having some nice bass, come out. Keep an eye on that. But the next couple seasons will show good. I got my cursor and now I'm blocking. Sorry about that. Let me check my questions here. Well, thanks, Eric, man. Eric says he's glad to have us back on. Yeah, I just took a little break, man. No particular reason. Sometimes I feel like it's necessary. You talk too much sometimes. Let things adjust. So, with that being said, now it brings me back to Alex, or my man Flipping Kicks up there, and he's got a common situation. He's got a bass bluegill pond, but he's got crappie. So, using that prior description, I just use it, of relative weights, how I'm tracking, how I use those numbers, and how I've been watching those numbers. Right. If I did electrofishing survey, and I wouldn't even really need to do one, I could tell you what the numbers would be before I even go out there. Even though he's been feeding his bluegill, and even though he's been doing his best to harvest some crappie, and he's been doing his best to keep his bass in there and manage the pond correctly. He's definitely seen some improved fish health with his efforts, and there's no doubt about that. Like he said, his bluegill doubled in size. I'm not surprised. That's pretty normal. And his bass aren't in terrible condition. Probably 85 to 93% relative weight. But that 85 to 93% relative weight, it's like a red flag for me. It's just waving in my face. Whenever I see that size class, whenever I see, and that's the thing. And again, Alex is a really good example. His pond is a really good example because here's a guy for the last couple of years. He's got automatic feeders going every day. Like I said, he's been improving habitat. He's been raking places and creating spawning beds, and really, really going the extra mile to manage the fishery and doing a great job. But at the same time, his bass still are not over 100% relative weight like the bass at the other pond, which the other pond is really, it's not that far from him in Georgia. They're not maybe 20 miles apart, maybe. So it's a pretty good comparison of what's going on there. And that 85 to 93 and 95% relative weight, you won't see too many bass break that, get hit thicker and healthier than that, and it's because of the crappie eating all of the bluegill. Crappie are very efficient predators, and they're eating other fish, the fish that the bass want to eat. So, and they're also eating the insects that the bluegill want to eat. So they kind of compete with both the forage and the predator that way. But that being said, packs of hungry crappie, can stunt quickly. They can spawn, and there's not much you can do about them. Sometimes it can really be like, for lack of a better term, pond cancer. If crappie want to ruin your pond for whatever reason, environmental factors line up, karma. I don't know why it happens or what, but causes it. But anytime you see crappie, you can just expect like a throttle limiter on your bass growth with a kind of random potential to really have damage done to your pond permanently, in the form of like losing the bass population to the point the crappie can feed on the bass fry to the point where they're just gone. You don't have bass anymore, and it ruins the pond. So for that reason, we don't recommend stocking them in ponds, but people don't listen to us and to just go get crappie out of the river, out of the lake, whatever, and throw them in ponds. And they're really messing up their bass populations when they do that, and they don't even know it. So let me scroll back and make sure I didn't miss anyone real quick. And my eyes are terrible. I need to get my readers. Frank, what's up, my friend? Talking a little fish population dynamics. So let's use our example that I talked about earlier about limited amounts of forage. I got a stack of poker chips sitting right over there. That's kind of the same. The forage would represent a stack of chips, a limited amount of chips, limited amount of forage. So when you have a bluegill only, say, forage base like we do at Sugar Hill, and you add some other species of fish, okay, you have to understand that other species of fish is eating zooplankton, is eating the things that the bluegill want to eat, and over time, as that fish population grows, let's say it's a threadfin shad population, because that would be something that I would recommend that you would, if you wanted to diversify your forage base in a small lake or pond, threadfins aren't a horrible thing to do. Now, most people think that diversity is good, that the diversity is the key to big bass growth, and that's really not how it works. Lakes are diverse because they have to be, because the rivers that feed them have 50 different species of fish that you're not going to keep out of a lake. A pond is different. Like we've had very good luck keeping all what I'll call trash fish, unwanted fish, or trash, trash fish, out of the Sugar Hill Outdoors pond. We've only had like a few channel catfish from the catfish pond get in from up the stream, and channel catfish are actually blend into ponds pretty well. And we've had some channels out there from like 4 to 6 pounds in just a couple years. So they're growing. The ones that sneak in on us grow real well. We harvest them out. It's no problem. Put them back up there. So not the point. The point is, if another fish was to get into our pond with our bluegill, right? It depends on the species of fish as to whether or not that's very beneficial or not. Like I said, if it's threadfin shad in there, I don't have a problem with that. They're prolific spawners. They school up. They have a different look. They have a different habitat preference. They're going to distribute the bass in different ways in the pond, different ambush points and things like that. Okay, I could go on and on and on about how threadfins and bluegill kind of pair pretty good together. And, that's okay. You can do that if you want to. You throw your threadfins in there, and they do their thing. All right. But you don't really pay any attention to harvest like we talked about at the beginning of the video. You don't really do anything else. Okay. What's going to happen is you're going to have, all right, let me see if I can do this. Let's say this stack of chips represents all of the bluegill in Sugar Hill Outdoors pond, and we stock threadfins. Okay. Well, it'll just do this. Now we got bluegill. Now we got threadfin population, but the total amount of forage never changed. It's still the same amount. We've just diversified it into 2 different groups of fish, right? So with this example, let's say this is their bluegill and this is their threadfin population, right? This isn't going to hurt us too much because threadfin spawn often, kind of like bluegill. They'll put off multiple spawns a season. Not as consistent as bluegill, but they spawn more often than most other things, so that's why it doesn't hurt us very much. But let's say this is like threadfin. I mean, this is like golden shiner. Golden shiner are even worse about not spawning. They can put off a couple spawns a year, but they're real spotty. So you're taking a forage base where bluegill are real consistent spawners, right? So you're taking a forage base that's really producing good, consistent spawns in your bluegill, and you're changing it with another. When you diversify, you're changing it. So you're reducing that real good, consistent, and you're changing it. And if you're changing it with another fish that doesn't spawn as often as bluegill, which is basically all of them, pretty much all of them, you're actually reducing the amount of forage available in that pond that you would have had if you just left it bluegill only. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain. Pure bluegill populations will spawn in more forage midsummer than any other forage combinations that I've ever seen. And I'm basing that based on a couple decades of electrofishing ponds. It's not like book knowledge. I'm turning electricity on and watching the fish float past the boat type of insight there. There's my man. You got that right, Steven. 30 years doesn't mean a thing. Yeah, Steven's right. He's kind of following through with what I just said there. And Steven was my roommate in college, fisheries dude. Works at the Extension Service and is head of the fisheries over there for the Georgia Extension Office. So it's kind of Steve's job too to inform pond owners and try to make this information known, so we can have more intelligent conversations about bass growth and how to manage our bass populations moving forward, in the future. And that's why I got into doing all this stuff, and the pond is a good example because, for lack of a better term, you got to crawl before you walk. We can put the pond out there. We got simple food chain. We manipulate it a little bit with some feed. That's okay. We bump it up some. We just, as long as everybody understands what's going on and how this is working and how all the pieces work together, then we can start adding other pieces like shad or crappie or red ear or whatever, and talk about how those fish species interact. But if you're here for a short time, not for a good time, I can tell you, just with your stocking strategy, keep it simple. All right, don't overthink it, especially in ponds. If you're just stocking a new pond, just stock it with red ear and bluegill, and they do about 100 red ear, 50 to 100 red ear per acre, and 1,000 bluegill per acre, various size, and follow up in the spring with some small bass, and you're cooking. You can follow what we did exactly if you're new on all these videos. It's all been done in real time, so I can't cheat. And it's an ongoing project. So, elaborating on what Steven was saying about multiple species of forage, it doesn't solve the issue. It really doesn't. And I'm gonna kind of get my my stick. Now I just need a dead horse. And I try to tell guys, man, all the time, like, don't stop paying those hatchery dudes, like, because guys won't listen to me. They want to spend money. They want to manage the pond, and they think pond management has to do with stocking, and it can sometimes. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't, but sorry. It can have to do with stocking a lot of times, but like, since I initially stocked the pond a few years ago, I haven't stocked anything else. I don't stock additional forage. That's why I was describing to you on the post today and on the video today, on here on the live, why I harvest bass because I'm helping the forage that I have available naturally, not forage that I'm purchasing from someplace else. Available forage, natural available forage, and how to channelize it to get the maximized growth for largemouth bass that doesn't cost me any money. And it's just a secondary benefit. I emphasize it doesn't cost me any money, and I use it as an emphasis because that gets maybe some people thinking about it, but it's how it's done. First and foremost, it's how it's done, and it saves you money. Okay. You're not going to do it with a stocking truck alone. And I've seen guys do it over and over and spend thousands and tens of thousands of dollars thinking they're doing something by pouring a bunch of forage fish in a lake or small pond, and it doesn't work. And you're just basically paying for fish that are getting eaten probably inside a week. Usually, I would say when the guys make a mistake, they think they're really doing something. I stocked 30,000 shad. 30,000 shad will get torched up in 5 days, man. Like, that's nothing. You put them off into a stunted bass population of like 1-pounders, you can kiss them goodbye in like 15 minutes. I mean, it's ridiculous how fast they can eat. Yeah, I hear you on that, Mike. I don't know what's going on with the notifications. I've been slacking on the lives. I mean, I'll be fully willing to admit on that. I have not, but fortunately, actually, I've had a few requests so to come back on and do it, and my fantasy team is stomping, and all the pro games are kind of crappy right now. So I figured I'd throw an hour in there. So see what's going on. You guys can throw any questions in if you want. We can move on to updating on the Rodman Reservoir Dog and Pony show. I was going to say something else, but I stopped myself. Okay, so, and I meant to go down there today and didn't. I'll do it later. They are supposed to be drained. Well, they're not doing it now, but they were going to drain the lake that I live at for a winter drawdown, which channelizes all the bass down into the river channel, makes them a lot easier to catch, and was going to be a big bass fishing extravaganza all winter. All went to crap due to hurricanes. There's so much water in St. Johns River that basically they can't drain this lake, is what it looks like to me. So they've canceled the winter drawdown for Rodman due to weather, due to flooding issues and things like that. I think they've canceled the drawdown, and I'll do a video on it and show you what I'm talking about. But I'm pretty sure I'm right. I've been messing around draining lakes before, and I'm pretty sure with where the water level in the St. Johns River is, which is all of Central Florida, you get 300, 400 miles of slow moving water going towards Jacksonville. It actually flows north. Most people don't know that. It goes right up the middle of the state and right out by the stadium in Jacksonville into the ocean. So there's a nor'easter blowing in from that direction for the last month, pretty much, and slowing down, letting the water out, the flood waters out. And on top of it, just a massive amount of water from hurricanes. And I bet there's 6, 7 more feet of water back there than there normally is. It's just a massive amount of water. It's ridiculous. Oh, James is coming through. Here we go. Water-based versus oil-based scent. Berkeley says all. Yeah, James. I was talking to Rudd about that, dude. And if anybody knows anything about scents and scent technology, and honestly, I can't even really speak on it because they privatize all that science. I'm certainly not going to say anything that Alex told me in private, just because I don't know what kind of I want to say no compete, but that's not the right word. What is it called? Non-disclosure he might have with them. But I can just tell you, man, Berkeley's not playing around, and there's definitely something to that olfactory and that smell thing. But I do think it's species specific as well, just like you outlined. I don't think I'm not saying that bass don't react to scent. I don't think it's primary for them. Um, I definitely think if you had something foul on a lure, if you had, say, oil, gas, bug spray, um, I wouldn't think any of those things on your lure would be helping you very much. On the flip side of that, and I've bass fished for a long time. I was late 70s as a kid. I was born in 73, so it was about 78, 79. I can remember catching my first bass. And I came up through all of it and fished the whole time. And, so all the scent things have come and gone. And as a kid and up until now, I've used those scent things from time to time periodically. I've really never noticed a difference for bass in the numbers of bites per trip from using scent or not using scent. That's just been my personal experience with it. When I got to Georgia, some of the studies that they threw out there were kind of like bass really don't use scent that much. But at the same time, some of the other things I've heard about, and also that was old research, really old, not current, not new. Nobody. That's the problem. There's not a lot of the new stuff that's going on is not at the college. I can't sit there and tell you about all the new bass research that's going on because most of it's done by private companies. Well, an oil base isn't going to disperse in the water. It's going to go right to the surface and float. So anything that comes off at the surface when you cast, anything that gets knocked off is staying on the surface, and anything that comes off in droplet form on it should just go immediately to the surface. Kind of like oil and gas from two-stroke motors. Everybody, makes the assumption that its politics have kind of contributed to that. Like when they did that whole four-stroke motor thing, and made like that's going to clean up the environment. Gas and oil don't mix with water. It floats on water and gets burned off the surface by the sunlight. It doesn't even stay on the water very long. So I think the whole four-stroke motor thing was a little more politics than science personally, but that's just really more my opinion than any research I've ever read. But that being said, I don't see how oil-based scents would work very well at all. Be kind of gimmicky, I think, unless I'm not considering another point. If there's another point I'm not considering, throw it in there and I'll reconsider. But right now, I want to say gimmick on oil-based. And I quite frankly don't really mess around with scents on bass. But I can tell you, gulp, whatever the heck, gulp, Gulp, for anybody who, everybody in Florida around here knows what gulp is. You just tell them you're using gulp shrimp or gulp sticks or whatever gulp. There's a bajillion different sand fleas and looks like pieces of gum. You just put a piece of gum on a hook. I swear, a pink looking piece of gum. And actually, he cut a piece of it. It's almost like a square. Like he cut a third of a piece of gum and stick it on a hook and take it down to the beach and catch a fish on it. Figure that out. I don't know. But again, that goes back to the fish at the beach are different. They love gulp. They love the scent. Yeah, I don't get that. That doesn't make it. I don't think so. It's gonna have to be water soluble, I would think. Or like you said, just chum. I mean, if you just got straight, protein particles in the water, yeah. Heck, even if it's just like I knew guys used to go to the beach and chum with freaking cat food and like cans of cat food for like a quarter. And back then it was cheaper, but the cat food now was all organic, and God knows I wouldn't probably use that anymore. Frank, are you harassing people in the comments again? All right, I haven't missed anything there. 35 minutes. I don't know. Throw a topic up, or I'll just punch it off, boys, because I covered what I wanted to cover tonight. Just wanted to follow up on that post. It got good engagement. The last couple posts. That's another thing too. I've been posting less, but trying to post better. If that's the right, I don't know if that's the right way to put that. How about this way? Post more intelligent posts less often. And not so much. I'm trying to get away from being so redundant on the beginner stuff, but at the same time, we still have so many folks that come in that are beginners. I'm been very fortunate that there's still quite a number of new people coming in, even though like right now the follower count doesn't go up a lot. It hasn't been like tracking up thousands, but hundreds of people come and go every day. I mean, you just see them dropping off and coming in. So for the new folks coming in, we got to cover it again. So I appreciate you guys being patient with me. And honestly, though, really, when it comes to learning new subjects, you really need to hear something 3 times and work with it and see it. Put your hands to it and think about it 3 good times, really, for an average intelligent person to pick something up. So going over old stuff really isn't a bad idea. Oh, sure. I can talk about that for sure. Frank's our comic relief from Canada, if you can believe that. He'll be here all week. Right, Frank? Tip your waitress. So James comes in. He wants to talk about shad movement at night. Yeah, how do I summarize shad movement at night? Kind of like just completely balling out of control, man. They're ridiculous. They are everywhere. Mardi Gras. The freaks come out at night. Like, where did everything, like, where, like, you're out there in the daytime and you turn on the electrofishing survey, right? And like, it's just like a wasteland, you're just shocking along. The thing is running, the needle is jumping, and there's no fish anywhere. Like, to the point where there's so many no fish, there's like so long no fish that you wonder, is the boat actually malfunctioning? Are we just riding around here just watching the water? Is this thing not working right? You're just in an area where there's no habitat, there's no fish, there's nothing going on, and they're not there. And you can't even shock them up because they're not there. You go back to the exact same spot 12 hours later. Say it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon. You go back there at midnight. That same exact spot is Mardi Gras with fish everywhere. Shad, all the fish just go wild at night. They don't orient to structure as much. They just go spread out all over the water column. So much, in fact, that, like I described, we're doing a shock survey in the daytime. We go past there, nothing. You put the same boat in, same lake later that night. You'll literally catch 3 to 4 times more fish in the same hour to 2 hour shock survey window, just by adjusting your start time 12 hours instead of going at lunchtime, going at midnight. Shock for 2 hours in the middle of the night, go home. You'll catch all the fish in the lake practically. Not really, that's just exaggeration, but you will catch considerably more fish with the 2 hours in the middle of the night, and it's because of that loosening and party type of atmosphere. Now, your thread fins and your gizzard shad are opposites in a lot of ways. Thread fins are schoolers, gizzards are scrapers. Not that you won't see gizzard shad in schools, not saying that at all. Just saying that threadies are filter feeders with mouths that kind of open like this towards, like if this is his head and his mouth is opening kind of this way towards the sky a little bit, where gizzards are more like that. Guess this guy, so he's this guy feeding, and these threadies are this guy swimming through the water, filtering the plankton right out of the water type feeders. So different, gizzard shad are bigger, much bigger, like thread fins. A adult, mature, biggest pimped out gangster thread fin of all time will be about as big as a 1-year-old gizzard shad, 6, 7, 8 inches at most. Gizzard shad get huge quick. Threadies don't. They tend to stay small and schools. They tend to kind of dip and move with the sun. Like they'll come out on cloudy days and tend to tight to the bottom on sunny days. One thing to be aware of in bigger lakes too, if you got any blueback herring, they'll be opposite. So on your sunny days, the blueback herring will be up under the surface. You can use surface lures and walkers and poppers on your blueback lakes on sunny days, and it'll go the opposite. The bluebacks will go deep on the cloud, and the threadies will come up on the cloud. Cloudy days is what I mean by cloud. So bursting speed too, like you're gonna to mimic threadies like a rig. It's gonna be a school with an offset, with small lures about like that. That would be a good mimic for a threadfin shad, small school threadfin shad. Where like gizzard shad, a good mimic would be like a swim bait. It's gonna be a bigger profile bait, kind of out by itself. Going to take different approaches as to mimicking those two species of shad as well. Hope that helps. Oh yeah, Rex annual. I'll probably never get rid of that. All I can do is just grow bass, show them the truth, show them how it works, and hope for the best. Night fishing with Frank. Yes, Frank. I believe that is a. I would say, there's probably groups of fish that are like. There's probably groups of fish that only feed in the day. There's probably groups of fish that only feed at night. I would believe that, or primarily. I'm not saying bass are going to feed. That's my thing about bass is that I don't think they can back off of it. They're like cat. Like when you put a string, like a feather on a string, and twitch it in front of a cat can't not jump at it. So if you can get something and twitch it in front of a bass, you have a real good chance of creating that reaction strike and kind of messing with him that way and catching him. But as far as feeding goes, like when you turn them loose in like a hatchery pond or in the pond that we did at Sugar Hill, and there's plenty of forage, man, they feed all the time. They don't really like turn on and off. Now, just because you're not catching them doesn't mean they're not feeding. I think that's the best way to explain that. Just because you're not catching them doesn't mean the bass aren't feeding. Heck yes, they eat, they chew. I would say burst with your shad, with your bigger shad lure, especially you burst the speed, then pause. Add the pauses with the shad. They love the pausing on their swimming. And at night, they are going to be in every direction. There's really not anywhere in a shad lake that you can cast at night. That's a bad cast. The fish are going to be everywhere. So if it seems like the fish are like out in the middle of the lake feeding or whatever, you hear something splash over there, cast to it, because again, it's not going to fish the same way at night as it does in the daytime. There's a good video about that on YouTube. I saw the scientists, I think it was about a year ago. can't remember what was the name of it exactly, but telemetry is what that's called, where they like tag the fish and they can follow them. So type in like telemetry largemouth bass, and it should come up on YouTube, in the search. And it's just like I said, it's not even, it's not two, it's, I don't think it's 2 years old even. It just came out. I think it was about a year ago. It might have been two, but it wasn't that long ago I saw it. And it was a really good study. I learned a lot because, again, we don't know. Like there's like people think there's like some unlimited amount of bass research out there because bass are really popular. Actually, most of the science classes that I took, they absolutely hated bass. You couldn't even mention them in class. The teachers didn't want you to talk about them. They didn't want nothing to do with them. They were all into long-nosed dace and green-sided darters and crap like that. So, there's a lot of things out there that we don't know. But that being said, how do I think about bass moving a given day or period of time? Some bass are homebodies and some bass are pack rovers, and it also has to do with their size. I also think like, your 3 to 5 pound bass are going to just naturally you're going to be in a good population anyway. They should be young. They should be 3 years old to 5 years old and young, doing what young creatures do in a group and causing chaos, pack up as 3-pounders and go school up and go, waylay some shad or whatever. Whereas you don't see schools of like 9-pounders, 7 to 9-pounders doing that. All right. Because one, their body's so big that they can't pack up and school up and feed really well anymore. They're not built for that anymore. So they become more like ambush predators, isolation hunters, and certainly not to say you can't be in a group of 3s that are feeding and catch you an 8 or 9, but you know what I'm saying. Generally, if you're on a school of 3s, you're going to catch you a nice limit, and then you're going to have to go find some isolated structure, some place to find a kicker, right? That's what I mean. So, based on the telemetry study that I did see and what I know about electrofishing, some bass are going to stay in some places, and it's just going to be like a personal preference, probably like genetic, and some bass are going to kind of roam around, and they kind of prove that. Like big fish too, like an 8-pound fish was up in like a foot of water all year. Like it didn't matter what time of year, she was right on the edge, right in a bush, stayed there the whole time, never moved. Same with another one, like I think it was like a 3-pounder they tagged, stayed out, I think isolated over a stump on like a nothing bank. And you would think, what's it doing out there doing that? But it liked the nothing bank and it stayed out on the stump there. And then other fish migrated all over the lake, really covered a lot of ground. And it almost kind of came across to me as like a genetic variable that you couldn't really understand or know, just other than the point of understanding that the fish can and will move around. Oh, that's a good question, Frank. He's asking how he's only got a month left of the season and it's getting dark early, and he wonders how the bass will feed when light is low and the water is cold. Well, I wouldn't be so much worried about either one of those two conditions. The cooling of the water, of course, is going to slow the bite down. We know that. I mean, come on. But speaking of, aside from super common sense, bass's eyes are going to be set up. They prefer low light conditions. I think that's why you sometimes see the heavily clouded days produce high catch rates. I've noticed that pattern, in my career. I think sometimes they just like it, but they can literally see better than the other fish around them in low light conditions. So they're predators. So their eyes are adapted to see better. They give up in complete black and complete bright. They make up for in low light conditions. Slightly. It's not vast, just slightly, but still. So whenever it gets dark early, I actually like it when it gets dark early. I'm waiting for it to get dark, Frank. I'm waiting for that time period, when the sun goes right behind the trees, when all the shadows change right then, you're getting new shade lines from that point to it gets pitch black dark. Um, I'm very, very attentive and stay. I never leave. I leave if I'm there that long, I'm staying until we better have a light because I'm not leaving until it gets real dark. We're gonna need lights. You really need to fish that last, hour till it gets real dark, and even stay in even an hour after isn't a bad idea. I would highly recommend it. Um, I don't think you will. I don't think you'll kill it on numbers with that strategy, but I think you will increase your chances of busting your PB with that strategy. Yeah, good. Kayak Bass has been managing some ponds in South Georgia and is having some good results. Things are coming along well for him, it sounds like, and I'm glad to hear it. Oh yeah, that's cool. I heard something about that, James. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting, man. There's all kind of cool stuff um coming out. I'm glad to see the new stuff coming out. I'm glad to see well, this page is getting some traction now. And I see a lot of people take sometimes verbatim the things that I say and use it on their pages with no credit to me, but that's all right too. I anticipated that when I got started, so I don't taking it personally. I would rather good information be passed on than some form of stupid social status or social media credits or whatever. I would prefer if you would give me credit for the work I've done for the last 30 years, but that's okay, whatever. What are you going to do? All right, what's Frank into again? He saw the Pinsta. Uh, yeah, those were nice fish, dude. They were. I mean, really nice, and they looked, relative weight wise, really healthy, solid looking fish, and that's what I mean about like you look at these, you start once you learn how to look and measure relative weight, right? You start to see the patterns in it, and you see like the diameter of the belly is slightly larger than the diameter of the mouth. That's a real good sign. Um, you don't want a huge mouth and a nothing belly. That's a bad sign, just generally visually speaking. And Frank was holding some fish like that. The bellies were at or larger than the mouth of the fish. And I could just tell those little slight little differences. It's like, oh, those are pretty solid fish. But Andy's up in Canada. But what you have to understand is he's up there with the pike and the muskie. He's in a different environment than the lakes that I'm managing, the pond that I manage, especially that's bass only is top predator. It's the only predator in the pond is bass. So he has pike and muskie, and maybe even tiger muskie if they're stocking those, um, to eat like one to or small bass, just to eat the smaller bass. So you don't see the stunning problems with bass up north because they have a top end predator larger than bass. So when I'm browbeating people about harvesting, it's about ponds and man-made impoundments that are where bass are the top predator. That's primarily what I'm referring to. And there's a lot of variables to all these things, that we're discussing here. And that's what that I've noticed, like people on the internet, they want to just take cherry pick one little fact and then just apply that to like every single situation. And that is really bad idea to do in this environment, in this job. Um, a lot of factors change in pond and lake management. That's a good question, James. They're doing a study on the it, when I was in school, they told it was poor handling, like somebody maybe putting them on dry on the ground or on dry carpet, or moving the slime coat and damaging the skin and allowing a bacteria to get into the skin. But since then, that's kind of the position I've held on it for years, more skin damage of some kind. But again, newer studies, things have come out, things are kind of moving in a better direction for us, and it's a virus. That of course, that doesn't mean that I'm wrong about my theory about being mishandled and causing it to be worse. That's definitely still on the table. But I could be completely wrong, and it just be not from handling at all, and be from like I may be spending time in a live well, or maybe it's just going to be something new because our bass populations have been skewed towards slightly higher in number, which means they're going to be smaller in size. When you get higher fish, when you get population of fish higher in number, each individual fish has less food. Each individual fish then has a suppressed immune system a little bit. They're not going to be able to handle things like they normally would if they were packed full of food. Maybe we're seeing, maybe we're seeing the results of poor handling and catch and release for 4 decades now, kind of all kind of coming together, Heck, and you know what? Maybe none of those things that I just said are the reason too. That's the thing about science. You have to use your best judgment to make an educated guess, but you also have to be willing to say my guess could be completely wrong. And if you can't do that, you won't be a very good scientist. Yeah, I don't think I've also seen them on very poor fisheries, and I've seen them for my entire career. So it's not anything new, but it is getting worse. Um, I don't know. Again, there's another perfect example. If it's caused by poor handling, you'll see it on good fisheries. Just because the fish are super healthy doesn't mean you can handle them poorly, right? They don't deserve that. Um, I would say until proven otherwise, I'm going to recommend to people that it's from handling, and you need to do better because everybody needs to do better handling bass. Like the bass handling is extremely poor. I got some videos back there if you haven't been following along. We talk about fish health and handling and all that stuff, but not the best fish handling practices shown on social media or television ever for largemouth bass, and we could definitely improve there. Okay, important question. Hey, yeah, if you want to catch a bass in Florida, that means you got to come to Florida, and yeah, man, let me know. I am not going to be going to Canada. I can tell you that. Yeah, I say make it happen, and put this one in your pipe and smoke it there, Frank. Since they're not draining the lake this season for the drawdown, this time next year down here. I mean, let me pull up the weather for you, Frank. What's your temperature up there today? What are y'all working with? Because this is perfect. This is actually the time of year this is why I moved down here. Current conditions in Fort McCoy, Florida, are 73 degrees. Tomorrow we're having a high of 84 and a low of 67. Pretty much 10 days in a row. So I'm getting ready to fire it up. Now the mosquitoes are still bad out there. They're still chewing me up. But this is my favorite time of year in Florida. It's basically pre-spawn. We're gonna have super early spawn where I am. But I would say that you'll if it's November now, yeah, we would probably within the next couple of weeks probably see bass add an egg weight, and certainly by next month will be pre-spawn here. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm firing it up. I've kind of taken a break this, I don't know, last few months. I haven't fished that much, nor have I posted that much or spoke that much. Just taking it easy, um, working, doing stuff like that. But I'm planning on. Well, I was really planning on going fishing hard every day with the water down, but that is going to be next winter probably. Which is to my point, Frank. If you wait till around next year, this time, it's great weather, get you out of that terrible place when it's frozen, and put you into a position where you're around, world class bass size stacked to your advantage. Down everything's 10,000 acres is pulled down into the river channel, and we can just drag the yaks down there and basically just drift it. Like we could drift 5, 10, 15 miles. We could put in anywhere and drift back to the house, or it's like a big river, really. So Frank says it started warming back up. High of 55 and 34 low. That's actually not too bad. That's still like 80 better, but 40, yeah, no. These long, I've noticed as well. Like you get the weather, you get the storms, you get these Florida fish are finicky. Like you don't want to be fishing these fronts. When I was back home in Georgia, man, all these fronts would have me running around. I'm fishing the water flow and coming down the pipes and the river and little streams coming in my lakes, and I'm on the fronts, the front side, the back side, checking all that out. Man, you don't want none of that. You want exactly what I just described right there. 84, 86 in the day, 64, 66 at night, 10 days in a freaking row here. Like you don't want weather here with these bass. Maybe it's different in other places of Florida. I don't know. Everybody keeps telling me Rodman is like hard, and I'll agree. I mean, it's hard. I don't do great. It's a real hole oriented lake, and it's high pressured with live bait. So, and hundreds of acres of water lettuce can cover your hole up overnight with the shift in the wind. So, yeah, it can be a challenge. 72, man, you can lay out in the sun, man. Global warming. Canada's not even cold anymore. What are you going to do? An hour and 2 minutes. I've run my yap. Let me go back and check, make sure I didn't leave anyone. Really appreciate you guys hanging with me. A good, engaging conversation this evening. I'm going to go get some allergy medicine. My eyes are watering again. And maybe some dinner. Go to bed and get up and do it again. I can't promise I'll be back next Sunday, but I'll try to be. How about that? And that's it. I appreciate you, fellas, and I'll be back next time. Later.